Apartheid was very bad. It was bad, and the black people decided to fight against it. So every attempt to fight against apartheid would be termed or actually demonized. So was the story of the man called Simon MPUNGOSE, also known as the Hammer Man. Today, it has marked 31 years since the Hammer Man was killed by the apartheid regime. He is known as the most notorious serial killer of MPUNGOSE. Often this thrilling tale shared by many of MPUNGOSE townsfolk of this 35-year-old man, MPUNGOSE, who was also given a name as the Hammer Man, because he would break into the homes in the dead of the night and kill the occupants with the hammer. He will knock them with a hammer in their heads. Now, the narrative of the victims or of the police then, apartheid police, would say he would then rob them their jewelry or possession, which is not true. Hammer Man went into the white folks' houses for a mission, and he believed that his mission was accomplished, because the only thing that is never said is that Hammer Man had a list. He never went. There were so many white houses in MPUNGOSE around the MPUNGOSE prison, around the place now called Five Ways. That is where he operated. There were so many whites there, but he didn't go to every whites. He had a list of his targeted whites, and those whites mostly were working for the government, either the prison wardens or the magistrate, and also there was one shopkeeper that he killed. I think, yeah, there was one shopper that he killed, together with Margaretha McCaskill. Margaretha McCaskill was a woman, and Hammer Man never killed women, but he killed this particular woman because she was a prison warder. That's the only reason. There's no other reason. And the Hammer Man was triggered by a situation where he went to prison and he saw how black people were put in cages to crush the rock, which was used in order to make gravel for roads, which was a part of punishment. This is something that which was done in Robben Island as well. People like Nelson Mandela were also made to crush stones with a hammer. And what they will do, they will put two prisoners around a big rock to crush. In that way, granules or shrapnels from the rock will jump out and hit another prisoner's eye. That's why you'll find that prisoners had eye injuries, either blind or one-eyed, because of this punishment that was meted by South African prisons then. So this was hard work, and Simon Pungose was part of that group of prisoners in Barberton and Leeuwkop, where he was once sent to serve a long prison term. So he saw how prisoners used the hammer, the same hammer that they were used to crush stones, to kill each other in order that they would be punished and be sent to what is called solitary confinement. He then resigned to himself that he will use the same method to attack whites, and he had a list of whites that he planned to kill. This is a planning that was done by him in prison. He said, after my jail term, I will go out and kill so many whites, and he had a list, like I've said. So when he was released, he then started his reign of terror, where we'd go house to house during the dead of the night and kill whites. This was his own personal revolution against a system that killed blacks in the name of rehabilitation and punishment. That's he then made sure that he will start his campaign. Simon Pungose is internationally acclaimed online by an online magazine called the True Crime Library. They noted that in December 1983, Mpungose killed Graham and Margaretha McCaskill, who were both prison warders. And in February the following year, he killed Justin and Terry Smith. Right, when he was brought to trial in November 1984, shortly after his arrest that same year, the Mpangane court was told that Mpungose attacked many other people during violent robberies, but never touched the children of his victims. That is where now the decision comes. He was not, the narrative is that he was doing robberies. It was not robberies. It was just sheer murder, because he made sure that it doesn't kill children. And he never killed women. The only woman that he killed was Margaretha, because she was a prison warder, and Simon Pungose had something against prison warders. And you must remember, in those years, not so many women were police or prison warders. It was only a man's game, because South Africa was then a man's world. Because even in the South African Parliament, in those days, there was only one woman, Helen Suzman. So you could see that it was as you could see in during the Nazi rule in Germany. In that cabinet, in Hitler's cabinet, there was no woman. It was only men like Goebbels, Goering, Himmler, Albert Speer, and the rest of them. So it was only men. So the same thing happened to happened to this guy. He was a victim of a men's world in South Africa. People who were hell-bent to make sure that black people suffer. And he was there just to revenge himself. He didn't care. He knew that he had no future in South Africa. The same thing that happened to Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela was a good lawyer, progressive lawyer in his law firm with Oliver Tambo. But because he saw that even in court, he is not allowed to sit in a certain area of the court. There's an area designated for black lawyers. If you are seen sitting in a white area in court, whether you're doing the same court with that white lawyer, you must always make sure that you don't sit in an area designated for whites. Otherwise, you will be charged for contempt of court. So that was the judiciary then. And Nelson Mandela saw it fit that he'd rather go for armed struggle than to be a lawyer in that kind of South Africa. So was the mentality of Simon Pungose. By the way, Simon Pungose looks like Nelson Mandela. He's got the Nelson Mandela looks. Here is Simon Pungose. This is Simon Pungose. If you look at him, he looks like Nelson Mandela, and he had that mentality, and he was hanged by the South African police. They hanged him. So this is the story of Simon Pungose. And Simon Pungose also did something that is not talked about, which led to his arrest. But let me deal with that once I have finished this propaganda against the story of Simon Pungose. Right. During his trial, Pungose stated that he wanted to die as he had had a hard life, complicated by the actions of the people who did not understand his plight. Now, his plight was the black man's plight. So he said it in court before Justice Broom. And Justice Broom, a white man, could not find any extenuating circumstances, noting that Mpungose covered his hands with socks during the robberies to avoid leaving fingerprints, and the fact that the defendant was a psychopath was not a mitigating factor in law. So a psychopath, now here is a judge that says Mr. Mpungose is a psychopath, and he finds no mitigation in that. But a psychopath is somebody who is mentally disturbed. But the judge, the honorable judge, says he does not find any mitigation in that, especially in the South African apartheid law. Being mentally disturbed as a psychopath does not form part of any mitigation. So he then sentenced him to hang, whereupon Mpungose threw his blue tracksuit into the public gallery, shouted and threatened that he would expose his person to the court before he was restrained with handcuffs. So that's exactly, this man did not care about what happened to him. He was just hell-bent that he will make sure that his mission is accomplished, and he doesn't care about. So in 1994, in the Mail and Guardian, a journalist called Kathy Powers highlighted some of the country's worst serial killers, and she placed Simon Pungose case as first on the list. So Simon Pungose was #1 serial killer according to Kathy Powers. And but Kathy Powers noted something that the whites then dismissed, to say the killings by MPUNGOSE had a motive, a racial motive behind. And according to another author, Rian Malan, in a book called My Traitor's Heart, MPUNGOSE is said to have told the court in Mpangeni that he was fulfilling a dream he had in prison 11 years earlier, in which he grew larger and stronger, and he broke out of jail and obliterated all the whites in his path. So you can see that the man was driven by something, and hatred for whites because of what whites had done to him, including jailing him as well. He then refused that he just refused this notion that he was a serial killer, maybe psychopath, right? So he said his murders were done because of what he had witnessed to his fellow black men, and also to himself, because of all what was done to him by white people. So this was pure revenge. It is clear that it was pure revenge. So he went on this rampage and did what he did. And he was killed by the apartheid laws, by hanging. He was sentenced to death, like I say. But this is how he got caught. People should know this, that Simon MPUNGOSE visited his home from Mpangeni. He carried his notorious briefcase where he kept his hammer. So on this day, he went to his house and found his brother struggling. There was no food, and there was just nothing, to prove that he was not robbing these households, as it is claimed that he went to try to kill people and then rob them. He did not do that. He just went there with the mission of killing this particular white man who has done something to him. He never killed no other white men for nothing. He only killed those who were prison officials, who had shops, who had refused him job because he had a criminal record, and those who had mistreated him in jail, and those who had sentenced him to go to prison. That was all the prosecutors, and everybody worked in court and warders. So those were his targets. So you can imagine how many warders were in Mpangeni. And because he only killed warders, he never killed warders from anywhere else. He only killed those who had touched his life somehow before his incarceration, right? That is now 11 years before he was killed by apartheid judiciary. So he went to Umlalazi, where he was born, and he found his brother, struggling, stricken by poverty, no food in the family. So he told his brother, listen, let's go. I can see that you are struggling. Let's go and get money from this guy who owned buses in a shop called Washesha Buses. So they went there, and when they got there, they found the man busy fixing the engines of his buses. and they just greeted him. He was very eloquent in Zulu. So they greeted him and said, listen, we are here to rob you. We want all the money that we have made out of black people here with your buses. So please give us all the money. And the white man obliged. He never refused. He just went and opened the safe. Then they took all the money, shoved it in his executive briefcase, and they couldn't take all the money because the briefcase was too little, but they just took what could fit in the briefcase, and got in his car. And I suspect that could have been a stolen car, if I'm not mistaken. But on this day, Hammerman was driving a car. So he came to, then this guy continued with the fixing his engines, and they had taken the money. They couldn't take all the money because there was a lot of money in the safe. They couldn't take everything, so they took what they thought was enough for themselves. And they got into their car, and Hammerman said to his brother, hey, I don't trust this white man. He might call the police, and the police might stop us. We might have a robbery. Just put the money in the boot. So, and he told him to actually put the money in the spare tire. Just lift the mat that is in the boot and put the briefcase where the spare wheel is. And his brother was scared. He panicked. He opened the boot, opened the carpet, and did move the tire, and then immediately he closed, and he had put the briefcase on the floor just behind the vehicle, and he closed the boot without putting the briefcase in, and they left. And when they came to a small forest near Tep Makatini's shop, there's a forest before you get there, and he stopped in that forest. They drove into that forest, and he said, okay, go and get the briefcase so that I can give you your share. When the brother opened the boot, there was no briefcase, and he got very angry, and then he took a gun. He took a gun and said, I wish that the briefcase was here, because I would be smashing you with that hammer as well, like how I smash white people. But in order for you not to feel more pain, I'll use this gun. And then he took a gun and shot his brother in the chest, just one bullet in the chest. And the brother fell off, and he thought he had died, but the brother didn't die. And then Hammerman drove away and went back to his hiding place in Mpangeni, because what the victims of Hammerman didn't know then is that Hammerman had a girlfriend in that same area where he killed these whites. So he had a girlfriend there. He was sleeping there in the servants' quarters, and then he would wake up at night and go and do his things. And then the police would run to places like Ngwelezana's Kaweni looking for this black man who was killed, and yet the man was hiding amongst them. So they wouldn't go and search in the servants' quarters. That's how they were unable to catch him. Right? They only caught him because of that robbery at Washesha. That was his demise. That was brought about his demise. Otherwise, he had done his things and he wouldn't be caught. So he left, and then the brother woke up miraculously and crawled to the road, and the car came, took him to hospital, and then he narrated the story, and he told that his brother was the hammerman, and the hammer was found in that briefcase as well. That's why there was that exhibit in court, because he even asked the people to give it to him, the court officials, and he confirmed that indeed it was the same hammer that he used to kill these people. So then his brother narrated the story and to say, no, this is the man who confessed to him that he killed all the whites that were killed in Mpangeni. And he then went with the police to go and point him out. So that's how Hammerman was arrested and sentenced to death 31 years ago. So the Hammerman did what he did because of the hatred that was meted by whites who had gone to the Hitler's war in 1945, came back, formed a government in 1948 after having seen how Hitler treated the Jews. So they came back and used the same tactics against blacks. These ghettos, concentration camps, because places like Ngwelezane, Skawini, which are meant for blacks only, KwaMashu, Umlazi, Soweto, Gugulethu, Nyanga, Khayelitsha. Those are concentration camps that were formed by the National Party during their rule from 1948. And this is what they had copied when they went to war with the General Jan Smuts in 1940, 1939, 1940, up to 1945. So they saw what the Germans were doing to Jews, and they came back and did the same thing to blacks. So we are somehow connected to the German history, because the suffering of black people is exactly what happened to Jews in Europe during the Nazi regime. Viva Africa.